Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Orjan Pettersson, who is the CEO, head of Protofoto here in Japan. Orjan, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's taken us a while to get together to do this.
I'm sorry,
I've been looking forward to it because you're a busy man, so we appreciate you could make the time today.
Probably more busy now at the end of the year than everything, but thanks very much for coming here.
Yeah, and you mentioned in the pre-discussion before we turned the camera on that you've been here 27 years.
Yes,
that's
indeed.
Quite a long time. So let's sort of start back. Where did the interest in Japan come from? How did you get yourself over here? How did you become the president of this company?
Oh, yeah, it's a long story, obviously. But when I came here in 93, I actually had studied Japanese at a small college in Illinois, Augustana College. Just interest in the language. And I think it all came from... Well, one was actually the Shogun TV drama in the 80s. Richard.
I remember it.
It was a beautiful story. And also, at the same time, the high technology that came out of Japan in the 80s. So successful and yet so far away. How could it be so Western? How could it be so successful? And also just... a language that seemed obviously totally impossible to learn. Mm-hmm. And being Swedish, I mean, we learn languages pretty early because we need them out in the rest of Europe, including English and then a third language, I suppose. And I just wanted to learn Japanese to see if I could ever speak it. Mm. So that was what brought me to study, among other things, Japanese at university in Sweden.
Mm. And you mentioned that you actually came here on some sort of scholarship program.
Yeah.
Some opportunities as a student to come, and that was in Hokkaido. How did that come about?
Yeah, Stockholm University at the time, they had an East Asian Studies program, so you could study Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, either one, and then you had common courses for politics, history, economics for those countries. And they actually had a very good relation with Tokai University up in Hokkaido at the time. So then you could apply for that. And I was one of, I think, 10 students from Stockholm University went up. It was kind of exchange program also because they also taught Swedish up there in Sapporo. So that was the first time, and thanks to Sasakawa Foundation and also the university, we were able to have some free time before we went up to Hokkaido. This is amazing. It's 31 years ago, but it feels like it was yesterday.
Really?
Actually.
Yeah.
No, I just remember how different, but at the same it is right now, because you still get that feeling of Japan is amazing.
Well, it is. And so you came back to work. When did you get back here to actually work?
Yeah, so I finished my master's in 97, and I felt, even though obviously the Japanese, at least written, was probably very good, I needed to learn to speak more, I suppose, and work in a Japanese environment. So I came here with 2 suitcases and started to try to find a job. Went via my Tokai University to get my first job, and I started at a small company called Aichi Sangyo, used to be in Kita-Shinagawa, who imported welding equipment from many countries in the world, the US and France, etc. So I was there pretty much as some kind of coordinator for imports, and especially they needed language skills at the time. My Japanese was not probably very good, but I learned a lot.
How long were you there?
I was there for 2 years.
This is located in Aichi itself?
No, I think actually the founder was born in Aichi,
okay.
So this is how it goes. But both that president at the time and his father both graduated from Tokai, so that was the link to Tokai University.
Right.
And they needed people with some language skills. At the time, I suppose also English was not that promoted within the companies, unlike now, actually, I would say. So it was a perfect job to start with because one, I was not one of the dorei, the slaves within the company. I had a little bit special expertise, which meant that I wasn't treated as harshly as the others, and also learn. I was the only foreigner.
What did the harsh treatment look like in those days? What did that amount to?
I would say it's more of the, the chore when people stand in the morning to listen one of the experts in the company for welding, and they have to be on time, otherwise you pay a small fine and stuff like that, and also overtime, quite a lot of overtime. Yeah. It was totally like you see in all those 80s TV dramas, with the Buccio, Caccio, Cacariccio, and all the salespeople around, So it was very hierarchical and weird. And being the only foreigner, it was a super place to learn everything, how normal Japanese companies work. Yeah.
From the inside.
Yeah, exactly. And also quite that all these small groups, they form a nice collective where they do help each other out, So very interesting. It was a very good experience.
And after 2 years there, where did you go?
Actually, I tried to make an export section of the company. I went up straight to the president to ask him to maybe one of those new people who came in that I could teach them English at the same time as we started to look at export options. He said no, and at the same time, there was a Swedish company who wanted a sales manager here in Japan for a battery company, actually.
How did that contact come? How did they know you even existed?
Well, I've had contact with the Swedish Chamber of Commerce, and at the time, I also knew the head of the commercial section of the embassy. So he thought of me, of course, speaking some Japanese, knowing some technical
Back in those days, I can imagine, late 90s, there can't have been too many Swedes here who spoke Japanese.
No. He was one of them, I think. Hans Rodiner, he was the boss of the commercial section. There were very few Japanese-speaking Swedes, and not necessarily even business people. I mean, they were married to Japanese women, and they lived in their separate words, and and it was a super chance for me because then obviously I could start running a business here, and I was the only guy who represented this company here in Japan, so it was straight into the fire.
So you're a one-man band here? You're on your own?
I was a one-man band.
Gee, you're doing everything then?
Yeah, and we had like 5 dealers, and then applications of the products were quite special, so it was everything going to look at huge generators in Hiroshima to tractor exhibitions up in Hokkaido.
It's been hard though, because these are people who specialize in their businesses, their whole careers, and you turn up, some Swedish guy who's been doing something completely different, no connection to this industry, and now he's our guy. And he's not a technical expert. And, that must have been a bit hard to have some credibility with these people.
I think I must have been naive because I probably was easily turned to either side. I remember that, among the dealers are always, they want to get to be favorized, etc. And I know I probably was very naive, but I really liked the job. Going out to places in Japan that I hadn't seen, and going out with people who only spoke Japanese. I saw it more like a second option to learn more of the culture in Japanese.
Sort of massive immersion class in Japanese language, right?
And I think the business was a little bit secondhand to me. I did succeed in what I was doing, and then gradually it opened up that I took care of APAC as well. So
well, you must have done well then to let you be entrusted with APAC as well.
Well, at the time, I don't think many people thought about Japan, China, Southeast Asia being that different, to be honest.
Okay. Well, he's in Japan. He can take care of China. There's no problem.
Exactly.
Korea or something.
Yeah, it must.
He understands it somehow. Yeah. Interesting. And so, how long were you there?
So that was another. The company was bought by Johnson Controls, a huge American company at the time, run out of Milwaukee. So I ended up in an organization. We were probably like 400 or 500 people at the previous company, and then Johnson Controls with 150,000 people at the time in the world, and maybe 3,000 or 4,000 here in Japan. So it was a huge cultural change for me.
So you went from a one-man band,
Yeah.
pleasing yourself,
Yes.
controlling your schedule, having no great reporting to anybody on the ground. Suddenly,
Exactly.
you're one of 3,000 people in Japan.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'd never really been the big company guy, I think, because just since I was pulled here by interest rather than business acumen, at least in the beginning. But I learned a lot at Johnson Controls as well, and the company gave me a lot of opportunities. But I also noticed that I would come back to the type of culture I had in my first Japanese company over time, but only the overtime just because you have to, rather than you need to.
Okay, this is the sort of obligatory,
Yes.
show the face, I'm committed, I'm with you guys, we're all a team here, we're all working mindless overtime for no point at all, but to show we're committed.
Exactly, and also those last few hours, what do you achieve? Usually people are standing at the coffee machine or even having a beer.
Or reading the sports newspaper or something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, it was interesting, but it didn't appeal in the long run. But I was there for 4 or 5 years then.
What were you doing? Like you came in you're absorbed into Johnson Control. You were doing sales and visiting dealers before. So what did they have you doing?
Here it was kind of a mix between B2C. So we had Autobatteries and Yellow Hat and all those car accessory customers. At the same time, we also had OE customers. So it was Toyota and Nissan. And at the time, I suppose Gon was here. So I remember being invited to the Nissan Stoke, I suppose, the supplier meeting at Prince Hotel, but the new Prince Hotel there in close to Shibaura. And in small rooms, I was together with huge suppliers here in Japan. I didn't know what I was doing there, but I remember going, you have to reduce the pricing, you have to reduce the pricing. He went through all the rooms with all the suppliers and said the same thing. Interesting industry, but kind of, it was, at the beginning of the 2000s, how the deflation and reducing the pricing was luckily I was working for the huge American company, so they probably didn't care what Mr. Gon said at the time. Very good, interesting job, but...
and did you meet him personally?
Yes, as well, yeah, but
as one of a
and since I also speak French, I thought I should brag about that a little bit for a while. It was interesting, yeah. His Lebanese, Brazilian French, so at least
is he a charismatic gentleman?
He takes up a lot of air in the room, that's for sure. Yeah, no, fantastic salesperson. How he ended up where he ended, that's another story, and we've all read about it. So
it's interesting though. When I was working in banking, I was in Shinsei Bank, which got bought out. And one of the investors was Santander, and I remember Emilio Bortin came to Tokyo, and I was a nobody. For some reason, I was in the retail bank, and this group of people who were giving him some report, the shareholder, on what's happening with his money, right? I was just a nobody with a bunch of other nobodies. And but interesting, you talk about someone takes up all the air in the room. He was not a very tall man, but very broad. That guy, he walked in the room, and I thought, wow, I could feel his presence just dominating that room. Yeah. I was like, wow. And I had this long table with a sort of curved shape. So you had to sort of go all the way around the table, because we are nobodies. We're sort of deep in the room on the other side where the nobody should sit. And he came right around. Didn't speak much English, but he greeted every single one of us. And I thought, oh, okay, there's something about this guy. And he was that feeling was like, wow, okay.
He got power and
charisma. He's a billionaire,
Yeah.
I've met a couple of billionaires. He's one of them. But yes, sucked all the air straight out of the room. I was like, wow, okay. So I can imagine Carlos Ghosn had something similar going for him.
Yeah, and also since I was pretty much the only other foreigner in the room, it's always my place. I'm that white Japanese person, at least. It's fun. Now, it was good, and I used Johnson Controls also to have a small to be able to go to France for a year and work there. So,
okay.
So within the company you could look for positions, and I happened to end up 1 year in France as well. But Japan pulled me back.
With Johnson Controls? Or
No, then I was approached by Thule, a Swedish company, at the time probably only known for the roof racks and the ski boxes and stuff like that. And since I had this car industry curriculum vitae at the time, the CV looked like I was in the car business. So they offered me an expat job here in Japan again. So I went back just after a year.
What here? What was your position?
I was the CEO of the
CEO.
Thule.
Wow, okay.
So it was my first CEO job, actually.
Had you been running teams inside Johnson Controls in Japan?
Yes, here for the powertrain.
The powertrain team?
Yes.
Right? Okay, and then you become the CEO, so that's a big jump.
Yeah, actually I think...
We'll come back to that, but
okay.
let's just move forward a little bit. So how long were you with Thule?
Thule, 13 years.
13 years?
Here in Japan.
As CEO the whole time?
Yes.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, it was interesting because, I mean, it also, thanks to the CEO back in Sweden back then, Thule did a brand change, kind of coming from the car accessory business, trying to be more of a lifestyle brand, gradually going in over to outdoor, I would say. And small company from in the middle of Sweden who managed to also to do an IPO in 2014, etc. So I mean, being part of an IPO for the first time is always really interesting, and meeting people at Deloitte.
I hope they gave you a big swag of shares as a faithful employee on the way through.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
nice.
Of course, you get well, if it's in your personal interest as well. I mean, of course, you're loyal to your company, but also understanding how, I mean, 2000s and the 2010s, where there were a lot of risk capitalists going in and finding healthy companies and building them up. And so it was also very interesting on the finance side to learn how do they do, how do they, and then 2010 came, so that was a bump in the road, you know. So
2010, what do you mean?
Well, after the Lehman shock.
Oh, Lehman shock 2008, right?
Yeah, 8, but then
earthquake in 2011.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's exactly. I almost forgot about that one. But,
so what happens after Thule? What do you do then?
Yeah, so 2017, I quit Thule. I'd been 13 years, started to lose a little bit interest, I think, in the job. I felt one day that I couldn't care less if the container left Sweden before the end of the month or the second, and I realized, shit, I've lost the geist for this job, or at least for this position. And maybe also, I mean, given that we have made that IPO, etc., I felt maybe so I called my CEO at the time, and he said, no, but think about it, 48 hours. I mean, we can maybe bring you back to Sweden, whatever. But I felt I had to leave the company. So, 5-6 months later, I left the company. And then I started looking for a new job in Japan. I didn't have another job set either. So
it's a very risky move.
It is when you only have 5 years visa, because I never bothered to get the age you can, the lifetime visa. So, but I ended up first at a German company who did sustainability software for large companies. And
as what? As the head, or as
as the only one-man show again.
One-man show. Okay.
But I mean, it was also for the tier 1 suppliers, which I had a lot of contacts from before, obviously. So it was good going around in Nagoya land, in Toyota land, and trying to get them. But then, kind of my dream job, because I like taking photos. So this Protofoto showed up in spring.
We'll just talk. Maybe people may not be familiar with Protofoto. Just talk about it a little bit.
Yeah,
what
niche.
Does the company do?
Protofoto is a company that makes made flashes, but also light for cinema. And it's very niche because we go into pretty much only the studios. That's our main target for all the fashion studios, etc., and e-com studios. So that's where we have succeeded since 1968, when the company was founded. so selling
originally founded
Swedish. So
Again.
originally founded in Sweden by two gentlemen, Conny Dufgran, who is still alive, and about 83, I think. Hope he doesn't listen to this, but anyway, he founded it, and it's been, given that Japan has been very strong with paper and commercialization of fashion, etc., and Dentsu and all that industry. They have a lot of studios, a lot of professional photographers. So Japan has been a market since, well, at least late 70s.
Well, I realise I made a big faux pas here, Orjan, because you offered me at the beginning. You said, Greg, would you like some lighting?
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought, I think we're okay. I should have said, yeah, absolutely. I want the full gamut of the photo lighting, set up here. I should have gone for that. But I see my error of my ways now, but we've already started, so we'll keep going. So how many years have you been doing this now?
So this is my 7th year, actually. Yeah.
So let's wind it back. So your first job, Johnson Controls, you're running a division there or a section there.
A team, yeah. Mm.
And, you've been running around doing your own thing as a sort of, Ronin type of guy in Japan, and then suddenly you're back in the headquarters of a big company. What was that like, running the Japanese team as a leader? What were things were sort of interesting for you about that?
I think I've always taken pride in reporting back at least what I've been doing, so I don't look like a slacker. On the other hand, when it comes to Japanese, it's all about the complicated way of setting up people's bonus systems, etc. There was a lot of reporting, a lot of Excel files back then. I thought that stopped me from being very creative and very amiable with my dealers, etc. I think it became very rigid, and I'm an academic. I'm not an engineer to begin with. I'm more of a networking salesperson. I'd rather be out in the field to talk to people.
Is this sort of, a spreadsheet-driven approach? Is this HR department? This is the way to go forward?
Actually, I felt.
Where's that drive coming from? Because, this is a Johnson Controls American company.
Yeah.
My image would be, really lean, mean, high efficiency, high effectiveness, forget the paperwork and the sort of drudge stuff. Let's get to where we make some money, get focus. But maybe not in Japan.
No, it was a lot of the traffic light things, Is this issue green? Is this issue yellow? Is this issue red? Etc.
So really high control.
Fairly high control
environment.
Yeah. What burnt me out and made me look for another job in France was actually that the time difference. I mean, going out to far out in Kanagawa every morning and then talking to Milwaukee late in the evening was really tough on me at the time. Yeah. So at 2003, then I asked to be for this job in France, so it kind of saved me. And then I also, at the same time, I had a team of 16 French salespeople instead, so I don't know which one was better, but at least it was much more free.
Time zone was the same.
Yeah, the time zone was the same, exactly. No, it was fun, and also...
Well, on that point, I mean, I've only ever really managed Japanese teams. I've never managed foreign teams, if I think about my career. I've had foreigners in the team, but not managed like 16 French salespeople. That'd be interesting. What was that like? I mean, that contrast of managing a Japanese team and then, okay, I'm sick of doing, the traffic light reporting here. I want to get out of here. Welcome to France. Here's your team of French salespeople. What was the contrast like for you?
I felt, the good thing about that job was going to then 16 different regions in France, eating their cheese and drinking their wine, but also...
Nothing wrong with any of that.
Exactly. Yeah. But sitting down with them and also, still a technological driven company, which means that you have a lot of knowledge from your previous work that you can help them with. So it was very much trying to be one with a sales guy, so that sales guy could reach his bonus target. We all want to help people be better, usually, and if they are not, they usually leave by themselves, so we have to replace them. But personal. I think I like this job because it was very personal, together with these salespeople to go and visit. And my French was probably worse than my Japanese at the time, even though my wife was French speaking. So, but I remember going out to La Rochelle, which is on the Atlantic coast, and meeting up with that sales guy with a small Renault, whatever, and then going to different shipyards where they make pleasure cruises or whatever, and then discussing the product, and afterwards having mussels or oysters and some white wine and some cheese and talk to him. And it's business.
Nice.
Yeah, and
nice,
business
right?
is personal also.
Nice.
Whoever thinks it's not personal every person that you meet, you have 5 minutes to form some kind of bond and respect for each other. I think that's still my strength, I think. And that's why I have such a good team here in Japan as well. I mean, I'm not afraid to give away too much of my personal self. I think that is a little bit on my management philosophy.
Well, just on that, I did an interview recently with Alan Malcolm, who's with Udemy, and he was talking about vulnerability and sharing. And he's a big believer in sharing a lot about himself with the team. We talked about this line around how much is too much and where's the limit on vulnerability, because you might have the fear that if you show your authentic, vulnerable self, people might not respect you. They might think, well, he's not strong enough to be the leader. Why should I follow this guy? There's always that I guess, nuance of how much is enough, how much is too much. How do you feel about that, and sort of that authenticism leading into vulnerability, into sharing? Where do you draw the line?
My first wife passed away in cancer, so that's 8.5 years ago, almost 9 years ago. And obviously then you ask the big life questions. And at that point, but at some point you need to let that go and not use it as a shield towards some people. And obviously people know that I have that experience, but it also makes me slightly stronger that I don't feel that I'm being criticized for being vulnerable. It's rather that you have to share who you are at the same time as trying to convince the other person that is why you should follow me. So yeah, it might be a fine line. I have chosen this, and so far I feel I get things back, because that means also that person who has some problems at home, you have to also understand the other person who works for you, that he or she, they need your help to understand when they cannot perform to the best.
Yeah, I've had both my parents passed away from lung cancer. And so, in my team, I've had 2 people with cancer. And I'm a cancer survivor too, not smoking, but large intestine cancer. And so, understanding that part of life, and also, we've all got, in my team, they're quite a bit younger than me, so they've got aging parents, and I've been through that, losing my parents. And so I think it gives us some degree of empathy around these things. And also you ask the big questions in life when things happen to yourself. It's like, okay, whoa, am I going to survive? Is it going to be okay? And I think I've become a lot more empathetic. I had very, very bad pneumonia back in 2007, nearly gone. I was nearly gone. 2 weeks in intensive care. I wasn't sure I was going to make it. And that really opened my eyes up a lot to a lot of things. I think, personally, I became a lot more empathetic as a result of that experience than I was before. And I changed. I know myself, I changed.
And it's not necessarily weakness. I mean, you let other people to judge you, obviously. I mean, you have a fantastic suit. If I would sit here with a power suit, would I put myself in a role of being a tough CEO? I mean, you have to open up yourself to also get the trust of the other people. For some people, it won't work because they are not empathetic or they're not open to that. And you have to maybe close a little bit your door. But I think people do. I mean, in this job, it's always are you remembered by the other party as well? You know, can they call you? Will they call you? Can you call them when you want to have some information? What's happening at Nikon? What's happening at Canon? Whatever, you know.
What about when you made the jump from, you know, you being division head, and then you go to CEO, different company, but you're CEO. So that's a, you know, scale of the company's different. I know,
very much
different, but it doesn't matter. You're still now you're in charge of everything. How did you go making that transition, and how did you go in terms of getting the people in the new company to accept that you're the CEO? Because you've come from a little bit different field. You know, what did you do to get them on board with you?
Here in Japan, I would say that I insisted on only speaking, writing, and reading Japanese. I mean, still, that is one of the skills that I've acquired and that is very useful. So at least I've never spoken English at work during all these years, even when I was not very good at Japanese, in the sense that first the respect comes from, okay, he has made this effort. And for every job, you also pick up things in Japanese society or these things are done this and that way. From my other company, we did like this, etc. There are rules. I think gradually you show them you have the experience it takes to understand the business, the challenges, the culture, the trust, the loyalty, the giri, the gimu, the giving back to the customer, and for them also being asked of being loyal to your company. I think that whole process comes from that. Actually, those years out on the field with my first job as a representative, that's also where you learn.
Got the hands dirty.
Yes.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. You're in the firing line with the buyer who's complaining about your defect or complaining about the box that came in had a defect or whatever it is.
But in the evening, they still pull out their mizuwari and sing some American country songs while you have to sing that Japanese enka. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, the end of the day, it's still only a business that is between two human beings or two companies in this.
And what about, you know, you in your second presidency now, right? So you're going from first time to second time. What did you bring from that first experience into this experience? Again, different field, different company. You come in, it's been existed, you didn't create it, you're taking up. What did you transfer across?
Oh, I hope I transferred a little bit more responsibility on my people. But also, as I said, the responsibility is not how many hours you put in. If you're responsible, I don't care if you work 4 hours per day, if you perform whatever your duties. I think that is something that I developed in the other company, that I also could. I cannot say how it worked before, but I feel at least that each and every person performs his or her responsibility plus helping each other out, which means that we have formed a bond, which I doubt it existed before, but that would be giving shit to the old president of the company, which I don't want to do. But I think that through this, my type of philosophy is that each and every person needs to feel that he or she is responsible and the expert of this area. Why is she there? Why is he there unless they are the experts? I've heard some bad stories from my friends who have worked at large Japanese corporations for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, is that they never get any responsibility. They get to work this same issue or whatever, but shouldn't step out of their small cubicle lines and try to grab some other type of responsibility. That is what I try to make. And hopefully that's why people like work at Aichi, the foreign-owned companies here in Japan. That's what I think make us usually different.
Because the tendency in Japan is to have the smallest circle of accountability possible. Yeah. So your job description eliminates everything else but this very narrow band. Yeah. So I will only do within this very narrow band, which is my safe zone of things I know how to do. And anything outside that is like, there be dragons and you're going to fall off the edge of the world if I go there. I don't want to touch that because I might fail. I might make a mistake. I might expose myself. Don't want to do that. I'll protect myself within this very small circle. So I think, the natural play for us as foreigners might be to have, let's expand and try different things and experiment.
Very much so.
But not necessarily for Japanese, because that's not the safe path. So, when you think back, you talked a little bit about how you engage people to follow you as leader. Is there anything else you found over the years that has worked well for you as the leader to get people engaged to follow you as the leader?
Oh, deep, dig deep in my... If I had answers for that, I hope it's my personality, but it would be.
Well, just on that, I mean, you're coming from Sweden.
Yes, yeah.
And it has a certain cultural context.
Yes, indeed.
I come from Australia.
Yeah.
It has a certain cultural context. We are not Americans, right?
That's for
and
sure.
So there's a big difference there in how we treat people, how we treat each other, our expectations about fairness, equality. Australia is a very egalitarian culture.
Yes, indeed.
We could never have a Trump as president telling how smart he is and how rich he is. Australians would just reject that wholesale, like no way, that guy's out. But America, they love it. So it's a different culture. They go for it. They've elected him president. Okay. But I think, because we're coming from small countries, and I think we're coming from very egalitarian countries, I think Sweden's also an egalitarian country.
Very much so, yeah.
How we think about treating people, I think, is maybe a starting point is coming from a different base, perhaps.
Probably, yes. Even though I've now lived outside Sweden more than I've lived in Sweden, but I've kind of never lost the contact since I've been working for 3 Swedish companies during my 27 years here. And that's true. We usually say have a flat organization. That is true, but you still have a hierarchy. It's not as difficult as the Japanese ones with 5-7 steps or something like that. But there is a possibility for anybody in the company to talk to anybody in the company, which I find very... it makes my life easy whenever you want to know stuff and you need to learn stuff. And my staff, all of them, they speak some English at least. And they do use, and one of them, she speaks Swedish, so even better. So that saves me a lot of job that I don't need to do. And I find that there is a fairly direct communication with the HQ back in Sweden, in Stockholm. And
so what about, say, for example, you've come educated in America and Sweden. You've had a lot of different experiences in Japan with different industries.
Yes.
One-man bands, big companies, smaller companies. You're plugged into the bigger world in many ways because you speak multiple languages. You travel as well. And so you bring a lot of creativity, I'm sure, based on your exposure and experience to the job. And one of the dangers is that we as the leaders can actually find out that we are the key source of innovation in the company because we're too dominant. We just got full of ideas and let's try this and let's do that and how about this? And we forget about the people who work for us and we need to get ideas from them. What have you found works well to get ideas from our team?
Oh, yeah. Ever since COVID, we had I mean, obviously we changed people work from home, etc., etc. But we started with Monday meetings instead of, and in the morning on Mondays we all reported what we were going to do next for the whole week. So I didn't have to keep track on everybody, and not just. But then we met at the office doing this, and then I started to make Monday coffee break cake. So every Sunday I stood, and they became more and more intricate. So we had a 30 or 1 hour break in the afternoon and talked about everything except work. And usually it was baseball, or which I'm not a big fan of, but still. And I talked about what challenges and people, and talked about society in general, why Japanese people not necessarily trust the government, which I was kind of surprised to hear. But I think at that time, when we were all vulnerable because we had our small houses or big apartments, whatever, where we were open to change the way we worked as well. I mean, we still have work from home 1 day a week. We're such a small company here, but we have that option, and that freedom that the Japanese feel that we can arrange their own work week, that is not necessarily common to all other Japanese companies. I think that has helped us to keep that feeling that, okay, I try this, I do this, and then I work from home. We have meetings like we did in the old time, but I still keep that coffee break on Mondays where we talk about everything else. And
You're still making the coffee?
I did the Swedish ginger cookies this Monday. So yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic.
It's Christmas. It's much easier then because the choices are
well
in
done.
Sweden saffron bread. We make saffron bread, and then we make ginger cookies.
Well done for you. And so. But getting ideas from people, like have you got a particular brainstorming methodology or some means or some structure of getting ideas to come up to you? Or
and at these Monday meetings, that's where I list the issues we have or whatever thinking, because I mean, obviously there's a challenge. It's been a challenging market in Japan for a long time for many industries. And you know that Japan is never... It never goes really bad. It never goes really well. That's what they say about the Japanese market. And the tabula rasa method, white paper. If you had the opportunity, what would you do now? That works with my salespeople a lot. What if you had totally open? They're not as creative as I want them, obviously, but then I think they're a little bit. They have a fear to come out with too crazy ideas. But we have those every quarter brainstorming sessions because we're a small company, so we have quarterly budgets. So we make 1 year budget every quarter, and that's where we have the possibilities for the next quarter to start a change plan. And then I need to go to person who's doing logistics and orders. Do you have a great idea? Should we use AI for this? How can we do that? Or should we change warehouse company? Small and big stuff. And every time at least there's 1 or 2 ideas that comes down that grows into something new, which I find, I mean, it's a tough, it's a conformist society, isn't it, Japan? So you should do like everybody else. On the other hand, if you start challenging the current market too much, then you can also become the black sheep within the industry, which can be even worse for long term. So you have to tread carefully what you come up with. And usually, if you want to be a long term company in this country, you need really to try to fulfill both the Japanese unwritten rules of taking care of your customers, have a perfect customer care, repair centers, good logistics, at the same time as to be innovative enough to come out with new products and present them in different way and go into the fashion industry, etc. I think that is where we every quarter at least try to find 1 or 2 ideas that we can use for the next quarter.
Just you said something there, just triggered a thought in my head. I mean, you're in, actually, as you mentioned before, a glamorous industry of photo shoots, models, very high-end products.
True.
Does that translate down to the team that they feel they're touching this? You're not in the actual business of fashion itself, but you're part of the product of making the fashion shoots work. And do they get some sense of that?
They do when we come to the big studios here in Tokyo, where they have people from the Geinokai, the
celebrities,
celebrity people, and that's where we. For some stores we make, and we invite good very known photographers to do this. And a couple of years we had Albert Watson here from the Scottish, and he was the photography. And there, you get to touch that industry a brief moment now and then, and we know so much. We know how we can teach even experienced photographers to do a better job, so that we're
your
always
equipment
there.
knows,
And
just I was wondering, because I always thought, something that's glamorous or touches people. It's not like we're just working in a boring, company that makes lighting. We're actually plugged into something a bit more glamorous than that. It's always a bit exciting. What about, we talked a little about trust before, so I'm not going to go back and talk about trust because we covered that off earlier. But I want to ask you about culture, because you always have headquarters umbrella culture.
Yes.
Then you have Japan culture.
Yes.
And then you have Orjan culture, how you like it to run.
Yes.
What have you found works well to build a culture that you want in the organization?
Well, I'm the big protector of the Japanese culture versus the head office. Isn't that always the case? That you need to be the smart guy who try to handle both sides. Because, even with crazy ideas out of the HQ, you have to distill them down to something that works to Japan. And I still, even though I've been away from Sweden for such a long time, you were talking about egalitarian mindset, and I think I still have that in me. So it's not that different, but we have that combination of that Japanese culture, but we have managed to turn that to our favor, that they are diligent, they are detailed, versus my Japanese colleagues, they solve the issues and try to be detailed when they do it. They do it on time as well. So you can combine this performance that Japanese tend to have with that slight pressure that Occidental Western companies tend to have on their staff. That is the tough line, I think. That is where I should be able to feel both sides. So is the HQ happy about our performance? What am I making my people work too hard, too fast, and not accomplishing what they think is best for the company? And I believe that is why it's for this company right now, at least, to have somebody like me here. But on the other hand, there are several Japanese who have done the same thing, being able to perform versus the HQ and with the local staff. How about you? Have you seen a lot of that type of issues?
It's always a negotiation, isn't it? You're an interpreter both directions. So you're interpreting why headquarters have a particular idea in their mind, and you're explaining to headquarters why that's not going to work, or we have to change it.
Yeah, and it
or
hurts
it's just ridiculous. It's crazy. It's never going to work.
And Swedes are not that confrontational either.
No. Yeah.
They're like Japanese in that sense, which is a hard part because then you sometimes you have to be slightly confrontational to make them understand maybe this idea is not exactly that Japan would gladly accept, etc. But I have my bosses in Sweden, they have enormous experience also in the international markets. So there are no news to them as well. They've been around.
They've been around.
Yeah.
What about if someone called you up and said, "Hey, Orjan, I've got this big job in Japan. I'm coming out here. I'm going to be running the company in Japan, but you've been here 27 years.
Yeah.
So how can I be an effective leader in Japan?" What advice would you give them?
bring as much experience that you have from your other, but don't forget to learn more about Japan before you start, because.
Well, here's a question. Here's a question. My impression, meeting expats here who are sent out to lead in Japan, is the preparation they get to come and lead in Japan is just minimal. It's like almost a joke, like I just can't understand it. But it seems to be that's okay. So when you talk about preparing yourself, what do you mean?
Well, it is, as you said, 27 years. I have a lot of experience of common life in Japan, so to speak. So well, obviously, my kids went to an international school, and you have those people who are 3 years with their kids at the school, and they come and they stay 3 years and they leave. How much? I mean, it will be a fantastic 3 years because Japan is fantastic, but will they be able to understand the business in those 3 years? I doubt that. But usually, I mean, hopefully there is already a team around them who can teach them at least. But I would say still have a healthy, questionable attitude towards these people who are going to help you. Because there's always an agenda still that they want to keep their jobs, or even though their sales numbers are bad, still you can bring in ideas from your previous jobs, but you just need to see that the people accepting those ideas really care about them. You know how people can just shelve the ideas until the next CEO comes over to take that job.
Get the stopwatch out. Oh, he's 3 years start now.
Yeah, and also, the big view on business in Japan, as the Japanese see it, is so diametrically different from most Western companies, where we learned from the quarterly reports and the EBIT reports, etc., that we strive for a company who makes higher EBIT for every quarter, every year, to make the share go up so the shareholders are happy, and also there are bonuses and whatever. A Japanese company does not necessarily strive to make as much money as possible. That concept is so hard for any Westerner normally to understand. The company is there for its employees, maybe for its management, and to make those 3% of EBIT or whatever. From the Itochus to the Mitsubishis to the Panasonics. There are very few companies who actually, I mean, there are the larger companies who make much more money than that. But the majority of the companies do not think like that. How many mergers and acquisitions have gone well in Japan?
Well, anywhere, actually. You could blanket ask a question, how many mergers and acquisitions are actually turn out successful anywhere in the world?
True that.
And particularly in Japan, I think. But in that sense too, we are thinking short term, they're thinking long term also, I think. And as you say, the value you produce beyond just the profit is societal contribution, welfare for the employees, longevity. We're going to be around forever. We're going to get swallowed up by some other company. We disappear, our brand disappears, our name disappears. No, we stay, we are represented, we continue the traditions, we continue the legacy that we've inherited, and we take that and we keep going. So you're right, it's a different path. So knowing all that, what should the person who's sent here be thinking? Because they've got pressure from headquarters, right?
They do.
Where's that quarterly jump in numbers? Now we sent you out there. Sunshine, show me the revenue jump.
And I go back to my first years. Go out with them. Go to izakayas with the first one. Go out with the people well, now they say the young people do not do that anymore. That's what I heard. They don't go to the Bonenkai, the year-end parties as much as possible. But the ear to the ground, I think, is still running a lot of business, being close to the actual business you're doing. It is hard for a shacho, a CEO, to go out to even to the suppliers or to the customers together with their salespeople. You know that you're not really supposed to go there unless all the issues are cleared before you go there. I've heard this many times, but make an excuse. We want to see this and that, and ask the supplier, ask the customer, because that's where you will get the truth usually. I mean, Japanese customers usually say the truth about you and your products. I think much more down to earth, rather than schedule high level meetings all the time. Try to be out there and together with the salespeople who I think
there's a certain truth at the Gemba, isn't there? There's a very
the Japanese
real world.
love it. I mean, I
yeah.
used to work for quality assurance in Thule together with my job in China, etc. And Sony, who came and visit our factory in China, they took a lot of pride that came every quarter to the Gemba to see to the actual place where things are produced to check on us. And I agree with them, because we had zero quality issues thanks to our cooperation with Sony at the time. And Japanese, sometimes obviously they have forgotten. There have been a lot of scandals recently with the falsified quality reports, etc. And 30 years of deflation, pretty much. Well, 97, after 97, the economy has been in deflation. I think as Gon asked us to reduce prices at the time, a lot of the suppliers have been asked to reduce prices, and they've taken shortcuts, obviously. It's been a tough 30 years for Japan. And I still have a job in Japan after 27 years. I suppose that's a miracle then, but I've done something good.
Well, you survived some ups and downs, that's for sure. Is there anything else you'd give some advice? Like, should they learn Japanese? You've learned Japanese. You've made a big effort. Should they do that?
3 years. They should at least learn conversational Japanese, I suppose. One of my big joys has usually been to exchange everyday small conversations with my neighbors here. I mean, people are generally fantastic in Japan. There's a small kernel of being nice before you being annoyed or anything in Japan. You can pretty much talk to anybody, and 9 out of 10 people usually respond to you. And it's especially, I mean, I'm special still. I'm a foreigner, so I probably get that treatment. But Japan has a very nice way of communicating, being polite and etc. and talking about the weather like in any other nation. But that is a big joy when I talk to, in a sense, to my neighbors or people in restaurants, etc. It's conversational Japanese, just to a certain level. It would be enough probably to make your stay much more giving and worth it, I suppose.
What's your definition of leadership? How would you define it?
My innovation with empathy.
Okay.
That you have to ask yourself, is what I'm doing correctly? But don't necessarily force a square into a round hole. Use that person's ability to use it in the correct way. I mean, obviously I have very malleable people here. I mean, they have through the years turned one way or another, depending. But we all carry the same load of trying to make more sales, or trying to present new products and understanding where we are, where is the market going, what are the trends. Big ears, obviously. The salespeople have big ears out in the market. They listen to what their customers are saying. So I think it's a cliche, but I think empathy helps also. But I mean, you have to take tough decisions sometimes as well. You know.
What about any personal habits you've developed over the years to make you effective as an executive or as a leader?
Picking up the phone, I suppose. Picking up the phone and not being afraid to call the ones who've given you their business card. In the beginning, I remember I had, I think it was just after I've quit Thule, because then I still had a lot of salespeople helping me out on the field, and I had those meetings with Autobatteries and Toyota or Subaru, all these companies, and it wasn't so difficult of a job but when I had these 9 months with a German company who made sustainability software then I had to make cold calls, or at least calls to people I'd met previously in my career. Because Japan, you won't get into a company unless you have been given a business card. I mean, cold calling in Japan is horrible, but at least calling somebody that you met somewhere.
Yeah, if you're just ringing up, can I speak to the division head or the section head? Forget that. You're no way. At least got to have the name, and if you've got the name, they'll call you back, and you're never going to hear from them. It's not that easy. No. Yeah,
and I think that is, and now, if my salespeople are out and I haven't got the time, and I call these dealers or the customers to ask them a specific, how do you feel about what is happening with this? And you just launched a product. Is being used a lot? Have you sold it? Blah, blah. And I mean, it takes time to have those relations, but people you met at least within the same industry, you should keep close at least to get the latest information, because I'm still somewhat at the top of an organization, so I don't hear about all the new stuff that is happening. I mean, rumors about, is Dentsu opening up a new studio? Where will it be? When will it be done? How much will that mean for our company? It's still an information society, and not necessarily all information is on the internet or through. You need to talk to people who have it. And there are a lot of rumors in Japan.
There are, and there's a lot of false rumors in Japan too.
I can imagine.
What about resilience? Because we talked before about Lehman shock, we talked about the earthquake, we talked about Corona, COVID, global pandemic. We've had a pretty rough ride, if you think back the last few years. What have you found works for you to be resilient?
Yeah. Tough. Well, family at home, obviously, that they are happy and safe, and also that Japanese people are not necessarily very flexible, so they always ask if something is outside the rules. I remember that specifically after the earthquake in 2011. You were here, I suppose.
was here, and I stayed. I didn't go. I stayed.
Yeah. We went down to Kyoto. There was no milk for my then 1.5-year-old daughter, so I remember that. Anyway, and I remember my sales guy. He said, "I'm stuck here, and I live. I should need to walk back down to Saitama. To Saitama it takes 6 hours. If I find a hotel, can I get? Of course you can get hotels." So it ended up that all the staff could get hotels inside as soon as possible. You remember how hard it was.
I remember it was an average 7-hour walk home that evening. I remember it.
Fantastic.
And I walked too. We were actually in doing some training for Loro Piana not Loro Piana, it was actually LVMH, Louis Vuitton in Omotesando during the quake. Day 2, teaching high-impact presentations. And then everything just changed immediately. We finally got the gear out. We walked back to Shibuya. Couldn't ring my wife because the cell phones weren't working. Got on a landline, got through to her, and said, "Okay, I'll meet you in Nishiazubu." We met them. We walked home. My son was at school at Seinan Shogaku in Omotesando. So she happened to be at school. The moment it hit, they were together. So, but it was a long walk home. So, and exactly, right? Of course you can take a hotel room.
It was crazy. And you remember all the bikes and everything was sold out. And I went next to an outdoor company in Sotokanda, and people were buying stuff from that outdoor. They didn't know if there would be no electricity and everything. So all the Bunsen burners and what have you. It was interesting. I mean, it was scary to be in Japan then. It's still a bit. I noticed that especially now my kids are older, so they're outside Japan. But I remember for years when I went on business trips down to Southeast Asia, etc., that I had this fear, though, that leaving your family back in Japan in case something like that would happen again. I think that there is this, even though you're used to the earthquakes in a sense, but those kind of earthquakes you never get used to, obviously. And
well, we had aftershocks too. I mean, you know, I used to read in the newspaper some earthquake aftershocks. Well, this is like 7 major earthquakes a day.
Exactly.
Every day for weeks. That's not a little aftershocks, like a little wobble.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
No, it's like a major earthquake again. It was terrifying.
It was horrible, wasn't it?
It was bad, but I'm glad that's over.
But what I learned from that was have your SOPs, procedures ready. I was running a fairly, I mean, like Protofoto here, I was running fairly small crew of 10, 12 people. And we, afterwards I realized that even though we are flexible enough, at least have an SOP if somebody gets hurt or whatever, what should we do, etc. We were in the Kanda area back then, and it was, you know, people out on the streets. It was like a huge carnival or something with people out. You remember how they, all these broad streets, and it was amazing. It was, well, but at the same time. So I've learned a little bit to maybe also have a backup, that we have procedures of what should be done whenever these types of
good reminder.
It was.
Good reminder.
And I'm not a big fan of huge rules, but at least I got some rules jotted down for that one.
Well, Orjan, thank you very much.
It's
been fascinating chatting, going through everything. Thank you. So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.